Hello, BookTube. Recently, Shelly Swearingen publicly shamed me by telling all the world about how I recently drunk-dialed her in the middle of the night and berated her about the fact that her little miniature schnauzer isn't as cute as my miniature schnauzer, and about the fact that she should weaponize her recent video about great big books into a tag. And in my own defense, I want to point out three things. Number one, her little schnauzer isn't as cute as my little schnauzer. Number two, the video that she made about massive books should be made into a tag. I was right, no matter how much I slurred my words. And number three, I guess, was to kind of sort of apologize. I don't remember the incident, of course, but I clearly intended to drunk dial either Deb to tell her that I kind of feel like getting married again, or to drunk dial Christopher Russell and tell him what a loser he is. Unless I've got that reversed. I might have been calling Christopher Russell to say that I feel like getting married again, and calling Deb to tell her what a loser she is. It's hard to keep these things straight. I assure you I could stop anytime I want. But since Shelly did weaponize her massive books video into a tag, I thought I would join in. And because I don't need much of an excuse to talk about enormous books. Now here, the category descriptor is a mammoth, as you all know from March of the Mammoths, early next year. And that is, in BookTube parlance, a book that is 800 pages or more. But, like everything else on BookTube, that's flexible. That's pretty flexible. What we're talking about here really is a book that is very, very noticeably longer than the normal length of a book these days, which is 305 pages. Plus an extra 30 pages for acknowledgments, because you need to name the 1,000 people that helped you to get your stupid, vaping, plotless, characterless, and finale-less piece of crap off the ground. You needed a whole village to do that. So what we're talking about here really is a book that is very, very much longer than that. Immersively longer, atmospherically longer. In the neighborhood of 800 pages, sure. I would say over 750 would be good. Although we're going to see that's an elastic definition. That's a mental category more than it is a page count, especially since the page count itself is changeable. If you take a 770-page book in a tall, slim trade paperback and you squash it into a mass market paperback, it will shoot over 900 pages. But anyway, first I want to go over the gigantic books that she mentioned and chat about them a bit. And if everybody that she tagged does this as a tag, does that mean I'm going to comment on all of their choices? I don't know. But the first one she mentioned is something that's come up quite a few times on this channel recently, which is an instance of the finger post by Ian Pears, who's written a lot of books, but most of them have been a fraction of this size. This is a huge thing. It's a historical novel told from four very different points of view, and as Shelly points out in her video, it is worth the read. That's the whole goal of this massive books tag, is what are some very long books that are very much worth the read. And this is one of them, in a way that I don't think it would have been if it had been a straightforward version of this. There is one set of events and one incredibly tragic main character that runs throughout all four of these different accounts of these events. There's one thing that does. There's one actual, in other words, story in here. But I think if you told this book from any one of, well, three of the 4 points of view, and just that, the story would have pathos, yes, but it wouldn't be anywhere near as involving. Because you're involved in this mosaic of storytelling by the end of the book. By the end of the book, you're trying to decide what most likely actually did happen. And maybe coming to the conclusion, Ian Pears is rather fond of this, I think, in his fiction, of realizing that we can never actually come to that conclusion about anything. Which is dumb and probably has its stupid Protestant roots in the Church of England. Of course, we can know whether or not something really happened and how. But anyway, you will be involved in this. It is not just a narrative exercise. Then the next book she mentioned was Antonio Scarlati's historical novel M, Son of the Century. This is a big historical novel about, believe it or not, a young Mussolini. Before he was a dictator, when he was pretty much everything else, including a jobbing literary person, a jobbing journalist, a very successful Lothario. If you are only familiar with Mussolini from the World War II era picture that you might have seen in your high school textbook, you won't have any idea. He was quite a dashing figure when he was younger. And this book does for Mussolini what Wolf Hall does for Thomas Cromwell. And when Wolf Hall did what it does for Thomas Cromwell, I was saying to all and sundry, or anybody who would listen, I would love it if we would get more books like this. Just don't imitate. Just don't imitate it. But feel free to take any figure from history, whether a known bad guy, which Cromwell definitely was, don't be fooled by Hilary Mantel, take a known bad guy and make him three-dimensional, or take a known figure of actual evil, which Mussolini was, and make him come alive. And that's what this book does. Without ever renovating his reputation, without ever making him anything other than what he was. It's actually a miraculous feat. And it continues in the other books, which it's now looking to me are never going to get translated into English. This first book is a miracle. Just a miracle of doing that kind of thing, of showing us that very little in history is at its beginnings as cut and dried as it is at its endings. By the time of Mussolini's end, he was pure evil. You can dabble in evil a little and still retain your nuance, even your rehabilitation ability, your ability to be rehabilitated. If you dabble in evil a little, you can do that. Once you have MAGA flags on your truck, once you are saying, well, who of us hasn't trafficked in preteen girls? I mean, once you can say what a MAGA priest actually said 3 weeks ago, which was, well, if I find out that Donald Trump actually abused my own preteen daughters, I would just find a way to forgive him. It would be really hard to do, but I would do that because my Christianity calls for it. Well, what's that you say? You excommunicated your son and threw bricks at him until he got off your property when he told you he was gay? Okay, I get it. I understand how your Christianity works. Until you reach that point of no return. I'm sorry, I've got it on my mind because 200 million Americans have reached the point of no return. That's a lot. That's a lot of people. That means never in the course of any day of mine anywhere at all, no matter what I'm doing, unless I stay in this room, I am going to meet one of those people. It won't be parading it. I mean, aside from the T-shirt and the hat, they won't be parading it. But there's no avoiding 200 million people. So it's on my mind. And I'm sure that it was on the mind of your average Italian in the 1930s. This book manages to put 3 dimensions into this creep without actually making him a saint. Hilary Mantel doesn't quite do that. She makes her Cromwell a saint, pretty much. It's really, really good. I know what a hard sell it is. I'm telling you that you're really going to enjoy an 800-page novel about Mussolini. And yet I am right. Look at that. When has Shelley's miniature schnauzer ever been that cute? He's a doofus. Anyway. The next book she mentioned was A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. I first became aware of this author with the book before this one, which was a Barnes & Noble pick. Barnes & Noble has a program, for all I know they still have it, where they pick a book and really hype it that month. It means a large amount of money for the author. It means prime placement in stores. I don't know if they do that anymore, but when I worked there, it was a big thing that they did every month. And they picked, I think, her debut novel. And the readers on the staff, in a staff of 35, we had 2, me and Deb. The readers on the staff were given copies of the book so they could, read it and praise it. You're supposed to praise it. You're definitely not supposed to get your free copy and not like the book. And then this book came out and took the world by storm, in large part at first because of this cover. We won't get into explicits on a family channel here, but let me tell you what has been pointed out many times before. This is an archival photo, and the person on the cover is not crying. He is not unhappy. He was photographed at the exact minute of a peak of emotion, but that emotion was not sadness. but the book has been subsequently dubbed torture porn, because one of the core group of characters has had the worst life that Hanya Yanagihara could think up for him. The worst life that she could imagine for him. Now, lucky for him, she, like all 21st century authors, has a relatively poor imagination. So there's nothing in here to touch a left-handed exercise by Dickens, so to speak. but there's a lot more here than that. This is actually some of the rhetorical ability that I saw in the previous novel to this is here in full flower. This is actually a wonderfully affecting novel, even though I think the main gimmick at the heart of it is a little cheesy. And then Shelley finished up with this, The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel, the aforementioned Hilary Mantel. This is the third book in her Cromwell trilogy. So there's Wolf Hall, which is The Perilous State of England, The Fall of Thomas More, The Rise, but very unsteadily, of Anne Boleyn. And then Bring Up the Bodies, which is The Fall of Anne Boleyn. And then The Mirror and the Light, which is much longer than the other two books, and has a lot of stuff in it. I've known a few people who've read this book. Shelley's right that most people who read Wolf Hall never go on to read the other two books. And even if they do go on to Bring Up the Bodies, which is the shortest of the three, they never do this. They never get to this book. And the people that I've known who have, a few of them have said that it wanders around. That it's not really about anything until its final 100 pages, which is in a trilogy about Thomas Cromwell that starts with Thomas More and climaxes with Anne Boleyn. Of course, the third volume is going to be the downfall of Thomas Cromwell. But there's all sorts of scenes that don't appear connected. There are all sorts of rhetorical flights of what I think is sheer brilliance that don't appear connected to the story. There are all sorts of events that happen in the reign of King Henry VIII. That there's an abortive marriage. I've had some friends say, well, it's beautifully written, but it isn't as tightly constructed as the other two. I guess I can sort of see that. My response would be that it is so beautifully written that I didn't care at all. My Canadian trade paperback of this book is so highlighted that I actually need another one. I need to find another trade paperback of this. Anything other than the trade paperback in America. The U.S. market has had 2 trade paperbacks of this book, and both of them are ugly. So I want either a Canadian trade paperback or a UK trade paperback to replace the copy that I'm wearing out. But this is brilliant. And also in her video, Shelley mentions at the very end of the book, of course, this is told from the narrative, the close narrative viewpoint of Cromwell. We don't hear or see anything that he doesn't see and hear. The narrative focus never goes elsewhere. We never see people talking about him unless they're talking about him to him. And when you write a book like that and you all know how it ends, I mean, everybody who reads these books knows how it ends. Cromwell's not alive anymore. I'm not spoiling that. Like everybody else who gets too close to Henry, almost everybody else, he gets killed. He gets his head cut off. And if you're telling a book from that close profile, well, what are you going to do in those last few pages? I wondered that when I was reading this the first time, and Hilary Mantel, her obvious decision of what I do was to just write the hell out of it. One of the most beautiful passages of prose I've read in a piece of historical fiction in 20 years. I might point out here that, for instance, Margaret George's book about Mary, Queen of Scots, also has the exact same problem. It is told from her close point of view, and we know how it ends. She gets her head cut off by a different tutor, but still, she gets her head cut off. And she tried to bring the narrative right to that point, and her final 3 pages are not only bad writing, but ridiculous. They're silly. They'll make you laugh when you should not be laughing at the end of a book in which the main character you're supposed to love is brutally murdered. Here, no, not at all. So good choices on Shelley's part. She didn't choose well with her fugly little dog, but she chose well with her books. And I wanted to do some choices of my own, and then I want to do a wild digression. So think of this as sober dialing. The first huge book that I want to mention that is well worth its page count is Robert Fisk's book, The Great War for Civilization. I've had this thing in galleys. Even when I was out of the reviewing game, people would send me galley copies of books. I had it in the Finnish copy, the American Finnish copy, many, many times. I've also had it in the UK trade paperback, which was my favorite format. Really, just this brick in the hand, and I did not keep that. I did not keep that edition, which it really kills me. I guess I could go online and maybe try and find it, but it kills me to think all you people in the UK can just wander into your local Oxfam and find that version, and it's not here. I actually haven't seen this in any format used at the Brattle in quite some time, but this is a gigantic panoramic look at the present day, at the time, the present day realities and also the recent history of the Middle East. An amazing book. Fisk is a terrific writer. Wouldn't have expected that given his CV, but still, he's a terrific writer. I love the book. Then we have something, this is going to be, let's just say, harder to find, unless it's on Project Gutenberg. I have here a picture from the Brattle Bookshop, where, of course, nothing is hard to find. This is 20 Years of Congress by James Blaine. New England's own James Blaine, who was in Congress for a long time, for an acute observer. He was also in cabinets of 3 different presidents. He was 3 feet away when a president was shot dead. He heard the bullet hit the flesh. A president was shot dead right in front of him. And he told the whole story, not that story, but the whole story of his time in Congress in these books. And these books, I know James Blaine's name is not remembered. Political junkies might know his name and some of the things he did or some of the influence that he had. Needless to say, it never occurred to him in his wildest imagination that the U.S. government that he served so faithfully and so energetically for so long would become a cult of personality to one man. That never crossed his mind. His worst visions for the future, what we're living in, never crossed his mind. But the point about these books, this is really one book, and the point of it is that his friends for years and years, and even his enemies in Washington and Philadelphia and in New England, were all hoping that he would write a book like this. They would give it its space, work on it for a long time, make it nice and big, and write an epic account of working in government right next to the heart of power for this long. And he did. And the book does not disappoint. It really doesn't disappoint. It really is very good. And will show you the workings of the American government like nobody's business at the time period, from Lincoln on. And then finally, you're supposed to, for this tag, you're supposed to just recommend a handful, 3 or 4 gigantic books that you consider to be well worth their page count. And for my final one, I want to recommend something that's a little odd. It's also a little bit of a cheat because it's a bit of a composite. This is Newspaper Days by Theodore Dreiser, and it's his these are large accounts of his days as a jobbing news reporter, as a reporter at a whole bunch of newspapers, including benighted Cleveland. He realized what a lot of young men realized right up until around the age of the 1980s and early 90s super mergers. Those super mergers, the kind of merger that sold out half the U.S. publishers and the Barnes & Noble chain or whatnot, the type of merger where Bertelsmann, a German company, would start to own everything, and where individual companies, individual news organizations would just be bought up by these gigantic conglomerates that would then dictate what the news will be. Once upon a time, that wasn't true. Once upon a time, you had newspapers of all kinds in every city, no matter how small it was. It was a mark of civilization when you had a town, when it started to grow, it was a mark of civilization that you had one respectable hotel, you had a library of some kind, and you had at least 2 newspapers. There are towns that had 4,000 people in them that looked down on towns with 10,000 people on them because they had 4 really good newspapers, and the town with 10,000 had 2. You call yourself civilized. You only got 2 newspapers. This also is a little bit jarring for me to say, since in Boston now we have 1 paper of record, and it is corporately owned and has been corporately gutted. So, but once upon a time, no. Once upon a time, that wasn't true. Once upon a time, an enterprising young man who had maybe more brains than education, maybe it was quick-witted and quick on his feet, who was willing to sit at a typewriter and work at a typewriter in order to make some money. Once upon a time, a young man like that or a young woman like that could go into either book reviewing or newspapers. It didn't matter. There was no reporting school. There was no journalism school. You would go and you would see if you could do it. You would see if you had the goods. So you look presentable. You sound presentable. You have a brain in your head. You make eye contact. You shake hands respectfully. And the managing editor is short somebody and says, I think there's something going on at the courthouse. There's going to be a meeting about a particular thing. Might be nothing. I'll fill you in for... You've got 5 minutes of my time. I'll fill you in for 5 minutes on why this could be important. It might have to do with the railway that may or may not be coming within 1 mile of the border of this town. It may or may not have to do with that, and so I need somebody there in case it goes out of control, in case it starts to be real. And I don't have anybody. Everybody else that I only have 3 people. They're all occupied elsewhere. You seem like you've got a head on your shoulders. I will give you this notebook. I will give you this pencil. Go. Keep your eyes open. Record everything you see and hear. That happened regularly all throughout the American Midwest, the upper Midwest, western New England. That happened in all those little newspapers, where an editor pressed for copy or liking the cut of your jib would say, go and do that and bring back what you have. Now, he's not risking much because he's pretty sure nothing's going to happen at that meeting. And oh boy, does he benefit if either nothing happens and you write it up like it's the most interesting story in the world, in which case he's found a great writer, or B, something does happen and you write it up really well and get it back right away before anybody else has it, in which case he's found a good reporter. He wins either way. Worst comes to worst, you take off with his notebook. So editors routinely did that. And Dreiser decided, after a very dreary early career doing something else that he hated, he decided to do that. And of course, once upon a time, American literature students would know that a very popular writing career spun out from that early decision. The reason that Theodore Dreiser was not a regional sales director when he was 40, but instead one of the most popular writers in the country, was because he made that decision to work with words, to work on deadline, to work for very little at first. And these dispatches from that world not only capture that world, but capture that Dreiser really well. Before he wrote a whole bunch of novels that, naturally, I think his nonfiction is better than his fiction, but Sister Carrie used to be taught in schools. I don't think it is anymore, but it used to be. But anyway, that is the last of the big books that I want to recommend to you as part of this impromptu tag. But I also want to talk about Mammoths just in general. I want to show you 4 of the most notorious Mammoths that are out there, and also praise them. They fit under this tag as Mammoths that are well worth their length. Now, let's see here. One of those that you don't even think of, most people don't even think of it as a reading experience, because it's been soiled for them by all sorts of ideological slants and cultural slants, so they don't think of it as a reading experience. But it is well north of 1,000 pages, and it can be a reading experience, a literary experience, and that's the Bible. The King James Bible is huge and well worth the time to read. Some of it is more readable than others, to put it mildly. But you live in a world entirely shaped by devotees of this book. 100% entirely shaped by it. So even if it weren't fascinating almost from start to finish, it would still behoove you to read it. So there's a Mammoth that is probably sitting on your shelf. that's well worth your time. Another one that is huge and is well worth your time is the first and still the greatest novel of them all, The Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikibu. This is the Penguin Classic Deluxe Edition, and this is the Royal Tyre translation? Yes. And this is incredible. It's an incredible book. It's a whole world on its own, though, so you cannot go into Tale of Genji saying, well, sit up and do tricks for me. No, no. As is the case with most books that are very long, that are over 500 pages. No, you don't do that. That's the joy, that's the allure of gigantic books, is that they tell you, sit down and enter my world. I am too big to care about your agenda. So sit down and enter my world. You can't use it for anything. You can't use my world for anything. It's too big. And if you do that, I will allow you to make your way all the way through, and you will be glad you did. And that is true with Genji. So even though it's disturbingly large, I still think that it merits its length in every page. And then we can finish up with two mammoth-sized books that are synonymous with length, even though one of them shouldn't be. One of them is Moby Dick, which is a long book, yes, but it's nowhere near as long as the books we're talking about in this video, or I would imagine lots of other videos that come up in response to this tag. Moby Dick is just seen as not only the great American novel, it is certainly the great 19th century American novel, but also this stereotypically long, forbidding book. This is all, the old joke is, well, you know, maybe I'll retire and finally get around to reading Moby Dick. This is this big thing that sits on everybody's shelf and nobody reads. That's a shame, because it's electrifying. It's incredibly good. But it's not all that long. This is the Reader's Digest edition, which is barely 500 pages. It just has that reputation. That's all. And then the final book here is I would think, synonymous with long books for people, for most people. Even though, as we've seen, there are much longer books, it's still synonymous with long books. And that is War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, a gigantic historical novel set during Napoleon's invasion of Russia, with a whole swath of characters who are affected by that upheaval one way or another. And none of the characters are minor in the conventional sense of the word. There's a core cast of 6 or 7 major characters here that are equally interesting. They're all radically different. And this is, I know that I would get objections from Anna Karenina fans, but this is Tolstoy at his best. It's an absolutely toweringly great novel. It is 1,500 pages long in most translations. So it earns its reputation as being synonymous with just long books just in general. But it's also tremendously good. It is tremendously good. Even in a bad translation, it's tremendously good. So I would urge you, if this is one of those mammoths just sitting on your shelf, that you always say, oh, now's not the time, oh, now is not the time, why not make it the time? Why not spend the rest of the year reading War and Peace or Moby Dick? Get them off the list. Anyway, those are some quintessential long books, some quintessential mammoths, whether they are or not, and then some recommendations of my own. So there you go. I will leave a link to Shelly's channel down below. And late tonight, I will try to control my drunk dialing so that it goes either to Deb or to poor Christopher Russell. And fortunately, in both their cases, I won't have to change one part of my drunk dialing script, because both of them also have weird-looking, ugly little dogs. So I'm on safe ground there. Anyway, I'll wrap this up, and I'll be back. Thank you.